Today, my episode is about brainstorming for your law school application essays. I am Dr. Nadia Castriota. I am the Director of Law Student Success and one of the admissions advisors here at Barrier Breakers. And yes, I know that this episode could take 2 whole days to actually complete, or even longer, because there's so many things we can touch on as we brainstorm for our law school application essays. But for today, I'm only going to give you a few tips, and I hope they are helpful. If you have follow-up questions, please use our platform to stick those questions in, and I will answer them on our mini episodes that we have coming up once a month. But in the meantime, I'm excited to give you some information on brainstorming for your law school applications today. So let's dive right in. All right, friends. So like I mentioned, today we're going to be talking about brainstorming for our law school essays. Important topic, yes, right? As you go through the application process, there's so many things that you're trying to organize and put together. And probably one of the most important pieces in your application is going to be those essays, right? Whether it's that personal statement or that diversity statement or that YX statement or any of the supporting or supplemental essays, it's probably the portion of the application that a lot of our students struggle with because they're like, where do I even start? What do I say? How do I get organized? Who's going to help me with this? And sometimes, even though we think, oh, I'm going to talk about myself and that's pretty simple, as we sit to actually do it, we realize that this is going to take a little bit more time than we thought. And that's okay. It's supposed to, and it's going to take several drafts, and that's okay too. And you need to give yourself grace while you're writing, but trying to be organized is probably the best way to start. So let's talk about this, right? In today's episode, I organized this into 4 parts for us. Number 1 being adhering to the guidelines. Number 2 is structure and organizing your thoughts. Number 3 is the purpose of the essay. And number 4 is getting feedback, finalizing, and proofreading. The first thing I mentioned is adhering to the guidelines. Whatever essay we're talking about, whether it's personal statement, diversity statement, YX, supporting documentation, what guidelines or instructions did the law school provide to you? Please make sure you read that. Reading is fundamental. If you are going into law school, we need to make sure that you're paying attention to the instructions or the directions that are provided to you in the law school application. And so I know I jumped right into things because there's so much information that I want you to have, but making sure that you figure out from the law school, what are they asking for? And how many essays are they asking for? Let's start there. So is a personal statement required? Is a diversity statement required? Or some other statement, YX statement, or supporting documentation that they require? Or your supplemental essays, right? Are they asking for specific prompts for you to answer? And, are they telling you what type of font to use? Are they giving you spacing? Are they telling you not to go over a page or 2 pages? And I know that we have a lot to say, a lot of things that we're trying to get out of our head onto this paper. And you're thinking, I have so much that I want to tell this law school. And that's great, but pay attention to what they're asking you. If they say we want no more than 2 pages, do not write 4 and think that just because they love you that 4 pages is acceptable. It is not. And we want them to read through your application, love you, and have that turn into a favorable response, which would be an offer of admission. So pay attention to what is being asked of you. So starting off with, how many essays are required for this particular law school? Which ones? Write them down. Get organized, put it on a draft, put it on a report. This particular law school is asking me for 4 different essays. Then look at each essay individually and write down the requirements for the essay. If it's a personal statement, great, let's talk about ourselves. You're going to be the main character in that essay. If it's a diversity statement, what are they asking me to talk about? If it's a YX, make sure you connect to the law school. Why do you want to go to that particular law school? If it's any of the other particular questions that they ask, what are they asking you? If they're asking you to talk about public interest, do not tell them about criminal law. Make sure that you follow the instructions. And make sure that if they tell you 12-point font, that's what you give them. If they say single space, that's what you give them. So please pay attention to the instructions. Law schools go through their applications every year to make sure that they have the information on it that they want from the applicant. So it is, I always talk about a mutual relationship. Law schools put the time in to make sure that they can have these applications ready for you and available. During the application process, it is now your time to make sure you read and supply them with the information that is being requested. Okay, so the next part, I said number 2 is getting organized and structured, right? I mentioned already that you want to put on a report all of the essays that's being requested of you, or all of the essays that's being asked as a part of the particular application process for each school, right? So make sure you get organized. Now, let's take that a step further. Getting organized means now that if you know what the essay is that you have to write, what are we saying and how are we going to say it? How are we going to start? How do we, what and how do we formulate our thoughts? All right, so let's start with, the easy one, which is the personal statement. And I say the easy one because most people start with writing the personal statement first and then diving into the other statements. But throughout this entire application process, you are the main character in the story. I always tell my students that putting together a law school application, there's a lot of black and white when you're filling out demographics and things like that, your educational history, academic history, all that other information. But once it comes to the essays, this is how you add the color to the application. This is about you. This is the opportunity for you to share your personal story with the committee. And so this is your time to talk about the experiences you've had or the experiences that you are currently having, putting them on paper to share part of yourself with the admissions committee so they can see who and how you're going to contribute to the law school community. In the personal statement or diversity statements, we're going to start off with introducing yourself to the committee, right? I said, formulate your thoughts. How are we going to organize this essay? The intro is about you. You're introducing a story about yourself, introducing a story about your experience, introducing something that happened to you, but it is making sure that you are putting yourself as the main character and talking about yourself in this application, in this essay. So like I mentioned, all of that to say is that structuring and organizing your thoughts is making sure that the beginning is attention grabbing. You want to make sure that you grab the attention of the reader. You pull them in from the very beginning. I want to know more about you as I start to read your intro paragraph. Ooh, this is very interesting. Tell me more. I want to know. And so I'm diving, as the reader, diving into your essay to find out more about you, the applicant. As you continue through your intro into the meat of your personal statement or any essay, now you're providing more thoughts and more experiences to back up your story. And as you go through this, there's a couple of things that I want you to be mindful of, right? Again, length. Do not go down the rabbit hole when we're providing examples. I don't need to know that you pulled up at 4 p.m. and the car you were driving was a blue car, and then you crossed the street and went to this north side of the East Avenue, right? I want to know the details of the experience that you're sharing with me, the reader, at the time. I also want you to be mindful of your tone, right? We talked about length, giving pointed details and providing those, right, that add color to the narrative, but also making sure that you are very careful about the tone in your delivery. Tone is so important. I try to remind my students that their experience is heartfelt and they're passionate about that, but at the same time, you are not projecting your opinions or feelings by pushing them onto the committee or the reader. And so there is a good balance, a really good balance of when you're writing, making sure that you are getting your point across without being very pushy or judgy, right? And so we want to make sure that when we're telling our story, yes, it is personal to us and we're expressing the passion that comes with it, but we are not trying to teach the committee a lesson or project our feelings onto them, making it seem that we're forcing our thoughts on them. So we want to be very careful with that as well. Our tone is so important as well. We also want to appear very sincere and authentic, We want to appear reflective and engaging, right? And we want to stay away from cliches or generic statements, right? It's okay to quote maybe a particular saying or from someone, an author that you are, passionate about, and you're trying to rope it into your story, but just being mindful of, like being very generic. Again, remember, this is your time to add color to your story, and it is about you. So always keep that in the back of your head. Why why do you want to go to law school? And you are telling the committee, the reader at the time, expressing to them through this self-reflection of story, you're sharing your experience with them, and throughout your writing, you just want to keep that in the back of your head. That is a great segue to the third thing that I like to touch on when brainstorming for your essays. It's the purpose. What is the purpose of this particular essay? And this kind of ties in the first, second, and the last, this third thought. Following the instructions and making sure that you're organized. And then what is the purpose, right? As you're putting your thoughts together and figuring that out, what is the purpose of this particular essay? Is it the personal statement? Are we talking about something about ourselves and introducing myself to the committee? Are you answering a question, about public interest or how you have contributed to the legal field? What is the purpose of this essay? What is the message that you are trying to get across to the committee? And in showcasing your purpose, you want to discuss any unique experiences or perspectives or qualities that make you a strong candidate for that particular law school. Make sure that you tie those into the purpose of this essay that you are drafting. In drafting or coming up with purpose, many times students like to talk about good things, many times great experiences, but sometimes students also like to talk about impactful experiences or adversity or challenges that they've overcome. And that's amazing as well, right? This is your life journey that you are sharing. And maybe part of this journey has brought you to this place that piqued the interest in law school, or something that happened in your life, right? That actually brought you to this place that now you want to go to law school, and that's okay. And you want to mention that in your essay. And so here's my advice on that. It is okay to talk about all of these things: challenges, adversities, impact, failure, leadership, but we have to keep in mind that we do not want to focus on the negative. This is not taking the committee or the readers down through a sob story of all the negative things that happened, right? It is okay to talk about the challenges, but we don't want to focus solely on them. You want to talk about how you overcame those challenges. What did you do to bring yourself out of the adversity? How did this impact your life? Turn it into the positive, right? Talk about all the things that you learned from the challenge and these obstacles, and how you use that to move forward, and what you're going to use from those experiences to make you a great law student and a great attorney moving forward. That's what we want to talk about. So by no means do we say do not talk about the challenges and the obstacles. Yes, they are a part of your story and a part of your journey, and absolutely you can talk about it, but we don't want the focus to remain there. We want to make sure that if you bring the committee there, that you also bring the committee out of it. Show us the light. What did you do at the end of that obstacle and challenge? And so just remember that as you're telling these stories, yes, you introduce the story, but then tell us about the experience and what happened after that. That is just as important as the details of the story. Take us through the entire story and how that ended for you. So in me saying all of that, the content is very important, right? So content and purpose go hand in hand. The content of what you're writing about, you want to pinpoint significant life stories and challenges and influential people or events in your life. And that goes hand in hand with the purpose. If you're talking about these experiences that happen, give us the details, right? Make sure that you put me in that place. I want to feel like I was there going through it with you. I always tell my students that the essays are my favorite part. We can talk about all the other things in the application, but once you get to the essays, what I enjoy about that is that I feel as though it's a privilege that the students have allowed me to just get to know a little bit more of them before sometimes I even meet them. When I was a dean at a law school, the dean of admissions, I'm reading these essays and I know that sometimes this is the first time that students are actually sharing some of these experiences with me and my committee. It's important and we understand that. We don't take that lightly in any way, that students are really digging deep sometime and sharing some personal things with us. And so, even when I do meet the student face to face after reading some of their essays, I tell them that, I appreciate them opening, being transparent and sharing, opening up to us and sharing their stories with us. Because sometimes I know it's not easy, but they felt that it was important for us to know this story. And so, again, like I said in the beginning of this episode, that this sometimes it's one of the hardest parts of the application because you're trying to figure out what you want to write. And sometimes your heart is pulling you in a particular way that it's telling you to share this story. And it can be very difficult to do so. But you share it, and we appreciate those stories when you're writing these essays. So just give yourself grace. And if your heart tells you to write in a particular way, do it. But just, try to be mindful. Like I said, bringing it all together, not focusing so much on the negative, but how you overcame the obstacle. Or did here's another way, like, holding yourself accountable for something that happened, or holding another community or individual accountable for something that happened. Or, did you step into a leadership position that was really difficult, and what happened with that particular position? There's so many things that can be discussed, right? But, you want to give us just enough detail to bring us into the story, but not down the rabbit hole, right? You don't want to take me down the rabbit hole because then I forget sometimes, what am I reading about? What was the purpose of this essay? Back to the purpose of the essay, right? So be careful with the content. So, in closing, with content, all of these things, along with the purpose, show the committee how this impacted your desire to want to study law, right? That's what it boils down to. You're sharing all of these things to bring us, the reader, the committee, to a point that shows us how you ended up here. What was your desire to go to law school? Why do you want to study law? What are your plans? By taking these experiences, what are your plans to do with that? And what impact do you want to make on the law, in law school, in your law school community, in your community, and as an attorney? What are your plans? And so you want to then, as we move into the conclusion of these essays, tell the committee what your plans are with all of these experiences and how you plan to use that moving forward. So that leads me to my last point. And I know this episode could probably be like 2 days long, because and if it was live, we probably would have tons of questions coming in about how to brainstorm with essays. So I know that, putting together an episode that's like 20 minutes long is just scratching the surface, but it is helpful to actually just have, if you're playing this in the background, maybe while you're trying to draft your essays, just listening to some tidbits as you formulate your thoughts could be helpful. But this leads me to my last thought, which is seeking feedback. This is kind of combined: seeking feedback, proofreading, and finalizing. Right? So seeking feedback is important. Sometimes we're embarrassed by our reading, or maybe we feel that our story is too personal that we don't want to share. But it is always good to lean on someone, and not your friend that's going to be nice about it either. You want someone to give you an honest opinion, right? Before this goes out to the law school committee, or the admissions committee. Find someone that you can seek some feedback from, whether it's professional, a professor, advisor, mentor, but just ask someone to read it. And if you don't have someone who can read it, walk away once you've written it. I tell my students all the time, once you finish that draft, walk away, whether it's an hour, 3 hours, next day, walk away, rest your mind and your eyes, and then come back and read it again. Read it with fresh eyes and see how you feel once you're reading your material. You might find that you want to reword something, tweak something. Maybe you felt it was too wordy, not enough detail, confusing thoughts. And then you go back and you make that change and then walk away from it again. This is not, writing essays is not something that's going to come like that. You got to walk away from it. It is a process. And yet, I always say in my other videos or when I'm doing my mini podcast that when you hit submit on that application, you want to be comfortable and confident that this is your best work. So seek the feedback or walk away and read it with fresh eyes again and see how you feel. The second part of this is proofreading. I just mentioned that walking away from your stuff, you might catch some things, and even though you're proofreading and you might use Word to proofread and review your stuff, no, like that's great, but do it over and over again and ask someone else with fresh eyes to read to see if they find something, because you want to make sure that there are no errors, especially simple ones, no errors in your essay before you submit that to the committee. And then finalize everything. Did you, go back through your steps? Did you answer the questions? Did you follow the guidelines? Did you introduce yourself to the committee? Did you stick to the details? Did you make sure that you have just enough balance? Did you come in with a good tone and balance, right? All the way down to, did I add enough about myself? Did I put too much about someone else? Did I go off on a tangent while I was writing? Go back through all the steps. Again, check your work, ask for the feedback, and then finalize everything, and then we're done. We're done, right? And then you have the shell of your essay now that you can use moving forward to maybe answer other questions and other essays for other applications. But you took the time to do this, right? And you should be very proud of yourself once we get there. So, again, I know, like I said, this episode, small tidbits to help you formulate and brainstorming and things like that. But I mean, this could be an all out day long episode of answering questions about essays, because there's so many essays now that could be included in applications and law school applications. I mean, I mentioned just a few: personal statement, diversity statements, YX essays, several different prompts for supporting essays and supplemental essays and additional essays that law schools are asking for. There's addendums, right, to anything, LSAT, GPA, character and fitness. There's so many things that could be included in your application. And so every time you sit to write anything for the law school application, take your time, give yourself grace. It is not a rushed process. And trust me, the readers, because I've sat on committees for years, can tell when you rush through an essay. That is not what we want. We can tell when you rush through an application. We can tell when it was not a priority for you, and you do not want that. So please take your time. This is, like I said, it is a long process. And at the end, long process with big sacrifices. But at the end, the investment that you put in yourself, bigger blessings. I say it all the time, right? And then you're off to your journey to start law school. And it's only up from there. I hope that it was helpful. If you enjoyed this episode, please like and share with your friends, and tune in for others that we have coming up soon. Again, I'm Dr. Nadia Castriota, the Director of Law Student Success with Barrier Breakers. And thank you so much for tuning in. Take care, my friends. Until next time.